Germany invaded the Soviet Union on 22 June 1941 with the ambitious goal of annexing Russian territory as far east as the Ural Mountains. The failure of the German army to take Moscow created a stalemate, and as the one-year anniversary of the invasion passed, millions of soldiers were left facing each other on a front line running from the Gulf of Finland to the Black Sea. Hitler had a clear vision of how he would defeat Stalin in the second year of the campaign. He would forget about Moscow and turn south into Russia's breadbasket. There he would plunder the Soviet economy, capturing vital supplies of wheat, oil, and various ores, before wheeling on either Moscow or Baku to end the war before autumn mud and winter snow once again stopped his armies. If Hitler had his way, the war would be decided in southern Russia before the end of 1942. One of the formations that would lead the drive into southern Russia was the former 1st Cavalry Division. The division had operated on horseback in Holland and France in 1940 and again in Russia. By November 1941, it was clear that large formations of horse soldiers were no longer of value, and the division moved to France for conversion into the 24th Panzer Division. The newly reorganized division had a Panzer regiment, a brigade of 2 motorized infantry regiments, an artillery regiment, and supporting battalions of motorcycle troops, anti-tank troops, divisional engineers, and divisional signals, medical, and supply units. The 24th Panzer Division returned to Russia in May 1942 as a fully motorized formation, though they retained many cavalry traditions and proudly painted a leaping horseman emblem on their vehicles. The division was assigned to the 4th Panzer Army near Kursk, in time to join Hitler's summer offensive. The Panzer Army was directed to attack east through rolling green countryside, sparsely populated by primitive villages and farms. As it had been the year before, confidence was high that the Russians would be easily defeated. One unit preparing for the initial blows of the offensive was Schutzen Regiment 26, made up of 8 company-sized units which in cavalry tradition were referred to as squadrons. The commander of No. 6 Squadron, Oberleutnant Georg McHale, had earned the Knight's Cross as a cavalry NCO in France in 1940. His task in June 1942 was to help the division open the way east for the 4th Panzer Army. But how would he do it? To accomplish whatever combat mission came down to him through the chain of command, McHale would have nearly 200 soldiers at his disposal, including 3 platoons of 4 10-man rifle squads, 18 machine guns, 3 5-centimeter mortars, 3 heavy anti-tank rifles, and motorized vehicles to carry them all in, backed by mortars, artillery, rockets, and air power. How would he coordinate the efforts of all these resources? In the movies, it's never more complicated than a few officers standing around looking at a map. The officer points to the objective, and the dutiful subordinate hustles off to see that it is done. For the Red Army, particularly early in the war, this was often how they actually did things, but a German commander with the luxury of multiple supporting arms and services needed a more modern approach to ensure everyone under his command was on the same page. The modern operations order has its roots in Napoleon's field orders. Division commanders were informed of their destination when marching, and the location of their corps headquarters, but Napoleonic generals often provided little else to their subordinates in the way of useful information, such as intelligence about enemy strength or the mission of neighboring units. As command and control were decentralized through the 19th century and into the 20th, with the lower-level commanders given more responsibilities, the drafting of orders became an elaborate process. While German field orders in the Second World War were typically less structured than today's NATO standard, they still contained the 5 major categories of essential information used in modern orders. Location was information on friendly and enemy forces involved in the operation. Mission was a concise statement listing the 5 W's of the operation. Execution was the commander's vision of how the operation would unfold. Support was logistics and other administrative matters. And leadership support, more commonly known in English as command and signal, which was the details of who was in charge and how information would be relayed. Full orders were not necessary. The fragmentary order, known today as a frago, was organized the same as a full operations order, but omitting elements that were not relevant or had not changed from previous orders. The saddle order was an order hastily given by a passing commander. Operations orders were generally given orally at battalion level or below, and in writing at higher levels. It was preferable to deliver an order orally when circumstances permitted, even if written, and likewise a written order could be an aid to delivering an oral briefing. The order was usually accompanied by a schema or diagram, generally done by marking a military map. At minimum, this would show unit boundaries and objectives, along with known and suspected enemy positions. These diagrams are known today as overlays because of the modern use of transparencies, but in the Second World War it was not uncommon for German soldiers to mark directly on their maps with colored pens or pencils. There were three kinds of offensive operations: a meeting engagement, the hasty attack, and the deliberate attack. As part of the opening round of a major offensive starting on June 28th, McHale wrote up his orders several days in advance as a deliberate attack. The orders suggest McHale didn't know what day the attack would begin or at what time. This was not unusual, and in recognition of this, military operations were set to their own timetable. In this case, G-Day specified the date the operation started. The day before the operation would be G-1, the day after G+1, etc. The exact time of the operation's commencement in this case was designated X hour. Military maps were printed in large quantities, numbered in series and in different scales for different levels of planning. It was crucial that the specific maps be identified so that every commander participating in the operation had the same understanding of the ground. A 1 to 50,000 scale map was not ideal for a company-level operation, but high-fidelity maps were somewhat more rare in the vastness of Russia than in more densely populated Western Europe. Paragraph 1 briefly discussed known enemy positions, which were passed on orally using a marked map. A Flanders wall was a double-apron barbed wire fence. Paragraph 2 is a detailed discussion of the situation of the 6th Squadron's parent unit, the 2nd Battalion of Schützen Regiment 26. In German military writing, companies, regiments, and divisions were designated with Arabic numerals, while battalions and corps used Roman numerals. It is modern practice when writing orders to outline the mission not just for the parent unit, but for the next two higher levels in the chain of command. Paragraph 2a only outlines the mission of the 2nd Battalion. Modern practice is to use the 5 W's to write a concise statement, and thus we get who, 2nd Battalion, what, attack the enemy at Trukashevka, when, X hour G-Day to be announced, where, assemble east of Semenovka, and why. Since only the next higher level of command is given, the why isn't made obvious here. The battalion has been ordered to secure the southern approach to Trukashevka and high ground north of Petryshiva, but it's not clear from this order what the regiment or division planned to do afterwards. By 27 June, the day before the attack, the division was concentrated at Shchigri. The reference to an assembly area east of Semenovka hints at the standard battle procedure used by modern armies. A concentration area was used to prepare forces for an attack. Vehicles could be fueled in relative safety, ammunition distributed, etc. Closer to the front, an assembly area was designated, where attack units made final preparations. The British also designated a forming up place where units covered off their assigned unit sectors just short of the start line, or what the Americans called the line of departure. This jumping off line was a crucial piece of ground. It might coincide with a physical feature like a ditch, road, or stream, but the entire operation was timed from this line. X hour was the precise moment that the first boots crossed the jump-off line. Unlike concentration and assembly areas, it wasn't important for the jump-off line to be out of enemy observation, since there was no requirement for the troops to stop on it. And while occupation of an assembly area could be loosely timed, crossing the jump-off line was timed to the minute to allow coordination of supporting fires and flanking movements. Finally, the objective was usually deep inside enemy territory. Other battlefield geography included the main line of resistance or front line. Beyond the HKL was no man's land, ground under control of neither side, and different types of objectives such as the limit objective, secondary objective, intermediate objective, and the final objective. Paragraph 2b notes that the axes of advance would be maintained by compass bearings. An open country like southern Russia, where navigational landmarks were sparse, orientation became harder to maintain. The exact timing of sunset and sunrise is also given. Paragraph 2c includes the identity of neighboring units, and this too would be marked on the schema. The illustration shows a 1954 dated U.S. Army map in 1 to 250,000 scale. The place names are in English and show the Russian spellings. The Germans were in the habit of using their own spellings for place names throughout Europe, and the orders drafted by McHale also used the German spellings. We can use this modern map to visualize what the contemporary schema or map diagram might have looked like. Typical information would include the main line of resistance or Hauptkampflinie. Another line might indicate the furthest extent of friendly reconnaissance. Objectives are circled, and boundary lines delineate the assigned sectors of participating units and any neighboring organizations. Different styles of lines help differentiate neighboring battalions, regiments, and divisions. The 6th Squadron's assigned sector is here. Unit boundaries often coincided with physical landmarks such as a road, stream, or tree line as an aid to troops actually on the ground to stay oriented. Enemy positions are marked here in red, including the location of a wheeled machine gun, a heavy mortar platoon, an anti-tank gun, landmines, dummy positions, and barbed wire obstacles. Friendly support elements are also marked on the map. Paragraph 2D outlined elements assigned to the battalion. 4 heavy infantry guns of the 26th Schutzen Regiment's 9th Company, which reported directly to regimental headquarters, were attached to the 2nd Battalion for this operation. In addition to regimental level support were a number of divisional level units, including a platoon of assault guns and 3 demolition teams from the divisional engineers. Fire support came from a battalion of the divisional artillery, a battery of mortars, a battery from the 2nd Heavy Rocket Projector Regiment, as well as dive bombers and fighter bombers. Paragraph 2E reveals that X-Hour was not yet disseminated. Paragraph 2F discusses the location of the battalion command post, which was the immediately superior headquarters that the 6th Squadron reported to. Modern practice is to give map references for all important landmarks, though if this battle was planned on a 1 to 100,000 scale map, it may have been easier simply to refer to a well-known landmark that McHale's platoon commanders were all familiar with. While Paragraph 2 discussed the 2nd Battalion in detail, Paragraph 3 breaks down how the 6th Squadron fit into the battalion plan. It was typical for a unit at any level to leave one of its elements in reserve. The 2nd Battalion planned the attack with the 5th Squadron on the left, the 6th Squadron on the right, and the 7th in reserve. As was the case in the U.S. Army, every 4th subunit in a German infantry battalion was a heavy weapons company with machine guns and mortars, and the 8th Squadron supported the other 3 squadrons of the battalion. In this case, they provided a minesweeping team and a battery of light infantry guns. The 6th Squadron's objectives are also detailed here. Paragraph 4 is an explanation of how the squadron would get from the assembly area to the jumping-off point, which would be the last covered and concealed position the squadron would occupy before X-Hour. The squadron would move at 2200 hours on G-1. Oberwachtmeister Brackebusch, one of McHale's 3 platoon leaders, would take his men to the forward edge of the assembly area and secure the jumping-off points with MG and engineer support. The order specifically mentions the possibility of a Russian spoiling attack. An insecure start line was a disastrous hazard for any unit, as troops leaving the assembly area would need to start fighting even before reaching the line of departure. Paragraph 4b specifies the order of march for the rest of the squadron, an important detail to prevent the confusion of subunits trying to move at the same time. A 2nd Assault Platoon and a reserve platoon under Lieutenant Keiler were to move an hour after Brackebusch, and the company was to entrench in the assembly area in their attack formation. Paragraph 5 emphasizes the security of the assembly area. Paragraph 6 contains the commander's vision of the course of the operation. There are a few details of how the battle should be fought. By this point, the division had spent long weeks together training in France. It was also common doctrine in the German army dating back to the 1800s to use mission-type orders where a commander specified a desired outcome for a mission, rather than specific details of how it should be fought. Paragraph 7 outlined where the medical services would be established. The company would have a main dressing station in addition to wounded nests set up by the platoons, where injured men could receive first aid and either return to the action or be evacuated down the medical chain. The order includes a specific instruction that each platoon was to loan 10 of their blankets for use by the wounded. Paragraph 8 is devoted to the squadron's vehicles. Contrary to fanciful depictions, motorized infantry in the German army used trucks rather than armored half-tracks as often as not, and almost always fought dismounted. Getting the empty vehicles forward was an important task, evidenced by the fact that an officer was assigned to carry it out. The Germans had a smaller proportion of officers than in other armies, and tended not to waste them on inconsequential tasks. Paragraph 9 listed an illumination level, referring to nighttime visibility, which was assigned a rating of 1 through 10, using a standard meteorological scale and measured in Z-mila, which translates literally as sea miles or nautical miles in English. The paragraph also summarizes signal flare color codes, which was a common method of communicating in frontline infantry units. Paragraph 10 describes ammunition resupply, and paragraph 11 communications. Paragraph 12 outlines where prisoners would be collected and where the dead would be deposited. Unusually, they are designated as the same point. It was generally considered unwise to advertise to enemy soldiers, even captured ones, how effective their weapons had been. Careful planning is not a guarantee of a successful mission, and while this particular attack did not go exactly as planned, experienced commanders realized that they never would. The value of a carefully crafted plan was in ensuring everyone had a common understanding of the objectives and how they could be achieved, setting them up to better adapt to changing situations. Unlike in comic books and movies, military operations as complex as a deliberate assault don't just happen off the cuff. When the 6th Squadron set off at 2000 hours on G-1, their movement was masked by the sound of a Ju-52 transport plane circling above. The Brockabush platoon successfully occupied the assembly area by 2200 hours. Some elements of the squadron did come under fire by a random salvo of Russian artillery. But the assembly area was secured. Oberleutnant McHale was among his men, ensuring they were digging deep enough and encouraging them to get some sleep if possible. At 0200 hours on 28 June 1942, the 24th Panzer Division's part in the long-awaited German summer offensive began. X hour. The guns of the divisional artillery were joined by rocket fire. The sound of the guns was comforting, but all too soon the supporting fires lifted, and the dawn attack commenced. The squadron rushed forward, with McHale joining the lead platoon under Oberwachtmeister Brockabush. The first obstacles were quickly breached, and the squadron moved on. McHale was hit in the leg by the first burst of Russian gunfire. Refusing to let his men carry the burden of the attack without him, he steeled himself and forced himself to continue. McHale refused to go back to a designated casualty collection point. Obergefreiter Getkant, following the squadron on his motorcycle, came forward to dress his wounds as the squadron reorganized. After McHale struggled forward to clear the way by personally neutralizing a Russian machine gun, the rest of the Brockabush platoon occupied the first line of Russian trenches. The platoon medic treated his leg wound, but McHale refused to be evacuated with the wounded. As the 6th Squadron prepared to continue the advance, heavy air attacks commenced on the remaining objectives. Even though their commander was temporarily down, the 6th Squadron had suffered only light casualties. Soon, prisoners were coming in, and despite some confusion in consolidating the objective, Brockabush's men reorganized and prepared to resume the attack. McHale wouldn't let them continue without him, and he fashioned himself a crutch and hobbled forward with his squadron as aircraft roared overhead toward the secondary objectives. By the time the squadron reached the second line of trenches, heavy air support and the relentless German advance caused the last Russian holdouts to break and run. McHale ordered the reserves into the lead, spelling off Brockabush's platoon. By 0900, the attack had penetrated so far into enemy territory that a Russian divisional command post was overrun. The 24th Panzer Division had gained at least 20 kilometers and forged a bridgehead across the Team River. The 6th Squadron had lost 2 killed and 11 wounded, while securing over 100 prisoners. Thanks in part to the successful attack of McHale's squadron, the 24th Panzer Division achieved a major breakthrough and went on to help clear the city of Voronezh. Hitler's desire for a decisive battle in southern Russia in 1942 resulted in the Battle of Stalingrad, where Georg McHale added the oak leaves to his Knight's Cross. He was evacuated with severe wounds before the German 6th Army surrendered. Georg McHale returned to action and was serving in the rank of major with the rebuilt 24th Panzer Division when he was wounded in combat for the 8th time near Nikopol on 17 January 1944. He died in a Luftwaffe hospital the next day. His name is recorded on a stone slab at the Kirovograd Military Cemetery in Ukraine. He has no known resting place.